and on your mobile. This is BBC Asian Network.
It is now 10 a.m. Good morning. Thank you to Tommy and the breakfast team. The phone-in show open for business. The question, does the Western media care less about Muslim lives? The Chapel Hill shooting of 3 Muslim students yesterday tapped into disappointment, frustration and anger and the lack of media coverage given to the news. The hashtag Muslim Lives Matter spread widely on Twitter, and it was asking why the story was not being widely reported, initially by American media, and then that spread to Western media. There have been accusations of double standards. Questions are being asked that if the perpetrator was Muslim shooting non-Muslims, would things be different? Or is the idea of media bias just a perception, and perhaps it's a victim mentality that is prevalent in the Muslim community? Are Muslims reading too much into this, being paranoid? Or does the Western media care less about Muslim lives? Text me on 81869 or email Nihal at bbc.co.uk and tell me what you think, and we'll start having a conversation after the news with Priyanka Deladia.
Got something to say? Then say it. Nihal on BBC Asian Network.
Priyanka, thank you very much. Excuse me. Good morning. Welcome to the phone-in show. It's 4 minutes past 10. My name is Nihal. The question, does the Western media care less about Muslim lives? 3 Muslim students were shot dead close to a university campus in the United States yesterday. A 46-year-old man, who you just heard Priyanka talk about, gave himself up to police. He was arrested and charged with their murders. But the Whitechapel shooting has sparked outrage online, with the hashtag Muslim Lives Matter trending worldwide. There is a lot of criticism that the media doesn't give equal attention to Muslim victims. Do you agree with that? Do you feel that there would possibly be more coverage of this story if it was a Muslim man shooting 3 non-Muslims? Now, this story was run on the BBC Asian Network News as soon as we could get it confirmed. But overall, do you feel the media could have done a better job? Or is the idea of media bias just a paranoid perception, a victim mentality? Perhaps the reasons were just practical. It doesn't take long for the story to spread on social media, but to turn it into a news story, verified by facts on the ground, that takes longer. After all, the news can't operate through a series of Chinese whispers. It has to make sure that the facts are in place and then report. That's the job of a journalist. After all, if a journalist gets their facts wrong, it can go horribly wrong. So, do you think that the Western media cares less about Muslim lives? Or do you think it reports the news? It reports the biggest stories? The murder of the cartoonists of Charlie Hebdo was a bigger story. It was more shocking. Not that these lives in America meant any less. It's just less of a story. And however cruel that sounds, that's the reality of the news. Or do you feel that if it had been a Muslim who'd killed non-Muslims, regardless of the facts, people would have speculated a lot earlier? 81869 is the text number. Email Nihal at bbc.co.uk or give me a call and tell me, does the Western media care less about Muslim lives? It's 10 minutes past 10. Good morning. You're listening to Nihal live on the BBC Asian Network. Does the media care less about Muslim lives? If a Muslim is murdered, it's not much of a news story. But if a Muslim murders, then that's a bigger story. That's more newsworthy. That fuels Islamophobia. That makes for a better, agenda, some would believe, in the media against Muslims. Or is it the case that we don't know the facts around what happened in Chapel Hill, the University of North Carolina campus, where 3 people were murdered yesterday who happened to be Muslims? The authorities initially are saying that it was over a parking dispute. The family of the victims are saying that it should be investigated as a hate crime. They're the details of the case as we know them so far. But what has annoyed many, especially on social media, was the lack of attention given to it. until much later on in the day. The BBC Asian Network, I'm quite proud to say, went with the story very early and was reporting it in our bulletins yesterday morning. Others feel that Western media organisations, especially American news channels, didn't report it at all. Didn't feel that it was newsworthy enough. So, is there a bias against Muslims in the media? Do Muslim lives matter less? You tell me. Shakila got in contact with us. 08459 440 445 is the phone number. Text 81869. Tell us what you think. Shakila, good morning.
Good morning, Nihal.
You think that there is a bias, don't you?
Yes, I strongly feel that. Very much so, yes.
Why?
I just see it every day. When it comes to Muslims, if they are killed in this way, there's not much. You know, like in Western media, they don't kind of do much work to highlight the real issue. Then, you know, like example, what happened in France, and I think it's.
Well, what do you mean? What was the real issue about what happened in France then that was not reported?
Well, in France, I think it was. To be honest, I think personally we're not going to know the real cause. It was.
Well, they said it.
Done that, and Muslims.
They were very clear. They were avenging the Prophet. They said it. It's on video. Them shouting it, saying it.
Well, then again, we don't know what the truth is, or even if they were.
They regarded themselves as Muslims.
Well, anyone can say that, even though Islam says, you know.
But why would you?
Doing these things.
Why would you just say it?
It's just that I don't know. There might be. I don't believe in. You know, there's a lot of conspiracy theories, and you know. So I don't.
But can you not accept people who do bad things can be Muslim? You don't accept that? Just in the same way people who do bad things can be Christians or Buddhists or what? Why should Muslims?
The Islam the right way, you know. Islam does not teach us to. I don't think they're following. If they're saying they are Muslims, you know, and they're doing these things, you know, they're not doing.
Well, a certain branch of Islam tells them that they can do these things, and they find Islamic. I don't think so. They find Islamic justification in it.
No, I don't think so. That can be any religious can take the words into context and say my religion said this and you know said that, but you know the real teaching of Islam is not this at all.
No, but of course, but that's a different issue. What the issue today is about the Western media caring less about Muslim lives, and yet on the Western media every day you see stories about what Muslims have done to each other, for instance, in Syria and in Iraq. There's no lack of reporting on that, is there?
No.
So clearly the Western media does report when Muslims are dying.
It doesn't the way it should, to be honest. It does report like, okay, you know, what happens in Syria, that's another issue. Today we're talking about what happened in America. You know, I have seen a video of sister of one of the men that died, and she clearly said it's more to it than a parking space.
Yes, she has, but the fact is that is her opinion. Okay, yes, she was much closer to what happened than any of us, but as a news organisation, we can't just report her opinion as fact. We have to report the investigation that goes into it. And yes, I've seen news reports say that the family are saying that this is a hate crime. So the Western media are reporting that.
Mostly they are saying it's over a parking space.
Well,
are saying much as they should.
Well, they're saying there's two sides to it, and that what is being reported, certainly from the alleged murderer's point of view, is that he was doing it over a parking issue, and the family of the victims saying that this is a hate crime. And that has been reported. I've read it. I haven't made that up.
Yes, and also that they had issues with him before in the past. And
yes,
he
they
didn't like the way they looked, and he didn't like, obviously you can see that they are Muslims, and he clearly made it clear that he hates them because they are Muslims. I mean, this is what we are hearing. But I don't think if we're going to, if the truth comes out, it's going to be written as it should by the Western media anyway.
Okay. Shakila, stay with us. Charlie Wolf is American broadcaster and political commentator. Charlie, as always, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nihal.
Charlie, what do you make of what Shakila has just said about media bias in the West and how they report Muslim stories?
I don't think that she's totally got it correct with respect. First off, I mean, it's a horrible crime. I'm just looking at the picture of the family here on the BBC News site. And, a beautiful young couple and the spouse's sister there. I mean, what a tragic loss. They were studying dentistry. One thing people have to remember is news, just like anything else, essentially works on a market base. In the free market, some stories are more important than other stories, and not necessarily for rational reasons. It's a supply and demand issue. And as I look at this story, and trying to look at it as a news editor would, at present, there is no proof that it was a hate crime. It apparently was over a parking space, but let's just for the sake of argument say that it was a hate crime. Let's say in the back of this guy's mind he thought, not only were they taking my spot, but these, whatever type Muslims or whatever kind of...
He seems to have had issues with all religions.
Yeah,
that's what's being reported.
But let's just even say, for the sake of argument, that there was some sort of a hate. What makes the other stories bigger and why this one maybe wouldn't play is there's no conspiracy, or there's no... bunch of atheists. This guy was an atheist and a secularist, according to his website. I don't see atheists around the United States saying, let's all gather around and get the Muslims. The reason why, for instance, the France shootings became an international story is that was an act of terror. And there is right now, unfortunately...
Aren't all murders acts of terror?
No. I mean, there are criminal murders, and there are some that are based on terror. The people, for instance, and here's another news story that's very big in the States right now, which you may have covered. President Obama, when he was speaking about France and the shootings, mentioned some folks in a deli. Well, it wasn't. It was people in a kosher deli, and the people that were the jihadists that went in there, or the jihadists that went in there, specifically picked that because obviously it was a hate crime of wanting to kill Jews. And that's part of a wider thing that's going on in the world right now.
Charlie, the argument is, from people on social media certainly, that if this was a Muslim who had killed 3 non-Muslims, the speculation would have been rife. News channels would have been very quick to jump on it in America and around the world, as they were with Charlie Hebdo. This happened, minutes after reports started coming in. News organisations around the world were reporting it as it unfolded.
Yeah.
With this, we didn't hear anything. We didn't hear a peep.
Well, again, you have to look at the environment. In the Charlie Hebdo case, we knew pretty quickly that yes, they went in shouting Allahu Akbar. We knew that Charlie Hebdo was a magazine that had satirized the prophet. We knew the next day that it was a Jewish deli. And again, this is part of the age.
But we knew these were 3, especially the women who were very, very obviously Muslim women. We knew that there is a climate in America. There are people talking about only a couple of weeks ago that the climate had changed post American Sniper, the movie coming out, and that they were worried about that. So we knew that there were elements pointing towards this. But, I mean, look, Charlie, stay with us for a second. I just want to bring Qasim Rashid in, author of The Wrong Kind of Muslim, who's a guest of mine and in the States. So, Qasim, very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. It must be very early in the morning for you.
It's about 5 a.m., but I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me this morning.
So, Qasim, you've heard Charlie Wolf, the American broadcaster and political commentator, say that these are very different cases. Charlie Hebdo and the killings of these 3 young people, these students in Chapel Hill, they're different. They have to be treated differently.
Yeah, it may have been a Freudian slip, but the very first thing he said was the most honest thing he said, that different stories matter differently. And right now, stories about Muslims being killed simply don't matter the same way. And this isn't my opinion speaking. This is statistics. A great report came out from the Journal of Communication just last December, where they surveyed breaking news reports, and they found out that in the United States, Though Muslims represent only 6% of domestic terror attacks or suspects at agency, 81% of the time in the news reports they're identifiable as Muslim. That's a vast disparity. But what we find here is that media has realized that this is a business. It's capital. It can gain clicks. It can gain attention. It can gain viewership. And so they'll find ways to sensationalize the issue. I'm frankly shocked and offended that we're even having a conversation about a parking lot dispute. You know, we look at things like the atrocity of Charlie Hebdo, and immediately people blame Islam. Critics, I should say. There's no talk of whether the Iraq war that killed 1 million innocent civilians could have upset Muslims, not that that would have justified the attack in any way. There's no talk whether the Abu Ghraib torture or the CIA torture could have upset Muslims.
But Qasim, just to interrupt you for a second, there is no evidence to say that this man said, I'm doing this for atheism when he killed it, whereas with Charlie Hebdo, as was pointed out by Charlie Wolf, that these men shouted Allahu Akbar. They said they're avenging the Prophet. Therefore, clearly you have a distinction that one group of people are saying that this is a religious action or based on religious ethos, whereas this other guy, it's much more vague. And as a news organisation, don't you have, as a journalist, a responsibility to find out as many of the facts as possible before you report on it?
Right, you have an equal responsibility. I mean, the New York Times reported that the Charlie Hebdo attackers, those terrorists, were in fact radicalized by grievances of the Iraq War, and that was a buried headline. And I want to emphasize, nothing justifies that attack either. But here, I'm not saying jump to his militant atheism, or rather his anti-theism. But what I'm saying is the level of nuance being shown here should be shown in every single case, not just when the suspected attacker or the terrorist is a non-Muslim. This person is an anti-theist. He praises anti-theists like Richard Dawkins. Other anti-theists like Ayaan Hirsi Ali have openly said that we need to destroy Islam by any means necessary, including militaristically. Anti-theists like Sam Harris has said that we should consider killing anyone with dangerous ideas or doing preemptive nuclear strikes on Muslim-majority countries or torturing Muslims if we have to. So when you have these radical...
But I'm not sure what all this has to do with news coverage. I mean,
wait.
Respect.
Okay, go. Charlie, go on.
You know, I'm not sure what all that has... I mean, those are wider arguments, and they're valid arguments on your other guest's part, but what this has to do with news coverage, this was essentially a local story. There was a parking dispute. The man pulled out a gun. He's had problems in the past with neighbors, and he shot these people. It was unfortunate they were Muslims, but I don't know at this point if it was central to the story.
But Charlie, if they were Muslims perpetrating it, the press would be very quick to look into the possible reasons for doing it. Qasim has just eloquently pointed out what could be the justifications, because this man has not been shy about talking about him being an anti-theist, and then, as Qasim has pointed out, other people who buy into that ideology, anti-theism, they also have very, very extreme things to say about Muslims. Therefore, it would be... it would be remiss of you as a journalist not to see a link between those two things, surely.
But I didn't see the link when I first saw it. I have not heard of a major anti-theism plot to kill Muslims, but we are in a climate.
But hate speech. Well, this is the point. Hate speech. The whole point of prosecuting people for hate speech, as you well know, with anti-Semitism, it can lead to violent acts.
Oh yes, and I fully agree. I fully agree. But we're asking about why this story is different from other stories. I mean, here's another.
Well, Qasim's argument is it isn't any different. Well, but it's being treated differently.
Well, first off, let me just state for the record to answer your original premise about do Muslim lives matter or do they matter less. I think Muslim lives matter just as much. I don't like the victim group mentality of black lives, Muslim lives, Jewish lives. Lives matter. That's let's get that clear. But when you're rating a news story, you're a local editor. You're looking at a whole bunch of different things as to interest, how it affects your audience, etc. And right now, we've had ISIS beheading people. We just had a young lady murdered. Granted, this is in Syria, but there has been people putting videos out, talking about radical jihad. So this is something that has put that in the forefront of people's minds in the West. So if it was a story where it was the other way around, we had the Fort Hood shooting, for instance, then yes, it's just natural that it's going to garner more attention. It's unfortunate, and if I was a Muslim, I'm sure I wouldn't like it.
But Charlie, do you think that fuels radicalisation? That fuels this sense of alienation in the West? That Western media does not care? Because you're essentially saying it doesn't care. It is a different agenda.
I don't know. Radicalization to me, I don't know. I can't see how that's going to. That may make people angry. I mean, listen. Speaking against
anger,
Jew,
does anger not lead to? Does alienation not lead to radicalization?
Well, I take a bit more self-responsibility. Over the summer, let's just take another example. We had the Gaza-Israel conflagration going on. That story played very heavily here in the UK news. I mean, people like myself, just as a commentator. Just for being Jewish, I was a baby killer. That didn't radicalize me. So, but I can empathize with how Muslims would feel over the coverage. But again, speaking as someone, and I'm not an editor, but speaking as someone who is in this business, you have to look at how stories are selected. And it's over a whole bunch of different criteria, and it depends on interest, and that's what makes these things different. It's not because this was a Muslim family; it is because it was a local crime.
Kasim, in a country you're well aware of, which has tens of gun-related shootings every day, why should this be treated differently than a nut job with a gun who just went too far?
Well, I think it goes back to the double standard that Charlie Wolf continues to ignore. He mentioned the beheadings and these horrible attacks being done in Syria. He's ignoring the fact that on the U.S. border, drug cartels and the mafia have done far more beheadings than even ISIS. They've killed far more than ISIS terrorists have. And this is on our own U.S. borders coming into Texas and the southern states of the United States. But because they're not Muslims doing it, media is barely reporting on it. He pointed out Israel, Gaza, and while horrific things were said on both sides,
calling jihad on the West.
We have to remember that there was a severe lopsidedness and a number of people killed as well. Look, I can tell you from experience that as a member of a Muslim minority myself, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we face heavy persecution in Pakistan. And one of the hallmarks of Pakistan media is that when Ahmadiyya Muslims are killed, they refuse to report it. They just ignore it altogether. And what this does is that those people who are already antagonistic to Ahmadiyya Muslims become more emboldened in their antagonism, in their ignorance, and their arrogance. And so when you have these kinds of horrible events happening over here, we have to point out Muslim lives matter, Black lives matter, because media refuses to report on it. It doesn't mean they matter more than Jewish lives or Christian lives or atheist lives. But when you have an entire media infrastructure that refuses to recognize the equality of Muslims or Blacks or any disenfranchised minority, you have to point that out, because if you don't, then you're going to have no counter-argument.
But the media was... Wait a minute. The media extensively reported Trayvon Martin and Eric Garner. I mean, it didn't ignore the issues around either of those individuals. Charlie?
You can find
Kasim?
There's no doubt about that. But I'll give you a classic example. Even right now, Black Americans comprise 13% of the population, but they're 40% of the incarceration rate. Muslim Americans comprise 2% of the workforce, but 25% of workplace religious discrimination complaints come from Muslim Americans. So there's no doubt you can find anecdotal data, and it's important to have data like Trayvon Martin, like Michael Brown, because those are examples of the message getting out there. But for every one Trayvon Martin that's reported, there's 1,000 that aren't, and that's the problem.
But there's the rub. I mean, with respect, Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown were used because it was pushing an agenda. And when people like myself said, wait a minute, here we're at least in the case of Michael Brown, where they had convicted the cop before there was an investigation, we now find out that he acted properly. The DOJ, headed by Eric Holder, is not bringing charges against him. But there were people like me saying, why is this case garnering all this attention? Meanwhile, black kids are shooting other black kids in Chicago and New York, etc., and it doesn't get a notice. So, there is some bias in the news, but a lot of times it's because there's an agenda, and the agenda is to try and knock down an institution like the police.
Okay, all right. I mean, but to be fair, Kasim, you brought it in, this issue that black lives matter less and Muslim lives matter less.
No, I wasn't objecting to that. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Kasim, Charlie, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's 31 minutes past 10. I'd like to know your opinions on this. I've got Anil in Pinner, I've got Jay in London on the line. I want you to join in this conversation. Lots of people texting in. Abu has said, Nihal, if a Muslim killed 3 white students, the whole of the Western world would be going on a solidarity march hand in hand with leaders of the states. Sadly, a Muslim life is not worth the same. Safi in Nottingham said, whether it's Muslim lives or not, 3 humans have been shot. It does not matter if it's over a parking space or a hate crime. A serious crime has been committed, so why is it not being reported full stop? Well, it is, once all the facts have been collected. If a Muslim had shot 3 people over a parking space, I reckon it would have been reported every single channel immediately. Junaid said, if it's about speeding Islamophobia, it gets aired more and always a headline. Zain Ali on Twitter said, ask your bosses, didn't see the BBC cover the killings like the way it would if it was the other way round. Harneet said, if Western countries or any other country are ignoring the value of Muslim lives, then it is not only wrong but is criminal. The problem is rightly being questioned in the West on shows such as yours. But do the Muslims themselves care much about the value of the lives of the Muslims as well as non-Muslims at the hands of such organisations as IS? Where do the IS get their ideas such as public beheadings from? If the answer is Saudi Arabia and the other Muslim states, then it obviously begs the question, what is the difference between IS, Saudi and the rest? Tariq is in Milton Keynes as well. He's just called in. Please join us. 08459 440 445 is the phone number. I would like to know if you think that the Western media cares less about Muslim lives, or do you think it's about the news agenda? And that's what it's about. And the fact is that an attack like the Charlie Hebdo attack is more newsworthy, however cruel that sounds. After all, there are thousands of people, tens of thousands of people murdered in gun-related crimes across America every year. Not every one of them makes the news. Now, there may be Jews, Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, all involved in that, the victims of it. But some of them, they're not hate crimes. Everything can't be reported. Or do you think there is a media bias against Muslims in the Western media, and that we care less in the Western media, and I'm of course a part of the Western media, care less about Muslim lives? 08459 440 445 is the phone number. Anil in Pinner, Jay in London, Tariq in Milton Keynes, all going to come on and speak to you. Why don't you join our conversation? You can sit there, listen to the radio, absolutely fine. But if you've got something to say, pick up the phone, give us a call. 38 minutes past 10. Good morning. Welcome to the phone-in show on the BBC Asian Network. Does the Western media care less about Muslim lives? That's the question I've got for you this morning. Is that paranoia? Is that a victim mentality? Or is there some truth to that? Because essentially that was what was trending on Twitter yesterday. The hashtag Muslim Lives Matter. Well, let's speak now to the Guardian journalist Shiv Malik. After that, Anil in Pinner, Jay in London, Tariq in Milton Keynes. Shiv, good morning.
Good morning.
Do Muslim lives matter less to the Western media?
No. I think we're looking at this also through the wrong prism, which is a kind of a moral prism. And you have to look at it through the prism of news values. So I don't think any editor would agree with the moral conclusion that Muslim lives matter less than anyone else's. But they would say, actually, look, it does matter about the circumstances, about how people were killed, where they were killed, what happened, if we're obviously talking about people being killed. Because that does inform what we do with it as a news organisation.
But if you make a decision... Wait a minute, Shiv, sorry to interrupt you, my friend. But if you make a decision to say, wow, a Muslim has killed 3 students, not a human being has killed 3 students, not someone with a gun, but a Muslim has killed 3 students, and we're going to report on that. And as someone, a non-Muslim, has killed 3 Muslims, we're going to say, actually, what we're hearing is that it's over a parking dispute. Now, Muslims, certainly on social media, are saying this would be totally different if it had been a Muslim perpetrator, that the press and media organisations in general would be much more eager to speculate, whereas now they're saying, well, you know, we didn't have all the facts. And this is where the hypocrisy comes in.
Yeah, look, you can only answer that from the perspective of what is a responsible thing to do. And I think The Guardian does do the responsible thing. Firstly, there's some contingent factors to note in that, which is that, look, when this broke, most US journalists were asleep, and it's quite difficult to ascertain exactly what had gone on. But look, we always do this with every event that happens, and it's my job in The Guardian to figure out with sort of most terrorism events what is going on. I'm certainly part of a team. And we always ask, well, look, what is the motivation of the person involved? Do we actually know the facts? Do we know why they're doing what they say they're doing? For example, the Woolwich killing. When this came up, it was just a series of tweets about a guy who maybe had, it came up as a guy who chopped someone's head off. It seemed unremarkable, totally unbelievable. But it was very quickly ascertained, because it was very clear from what was going on the ground, this guy had a larger motive, and he was telling people, spouting to people on the ground that he was doing this in the name of Islam. Now, now you could say, well, this guy's just a lone nutter using Islam as a cover. And yeah, people make that argument. But suddenly, obviously, this is happening geographically very close to news organizations in London. So it's suddenly elevated. Someone has been killed. We didn't know it was a soldier until much later at the end of the day. But suddenly, yeah, we take that with a lot more news prominence. Then we don't cover killings in the US, generally speaking. We don't cover certainly all of them. We don't cover shootings. We cover mass shootings here from our London desk, if they happen. But with this event, it wasn't quite clear what had happened. Now, when it started to become clear this guy may have been a racist with larger motives, and that certainly elevated it. And it became the second most read thing on our site. So our readers certainly also cared about it from that perspective. But I don't think there is a hypocrisy. It's certainly not as overt as that, right? So it's actually not that do Muslim lives matter or not? Because we don't talk about Christians in Syria who've been killed all that often. So you could equally say, well, do Christian lives matter? Well, actually, what we're talking about is, do British lives matter? We've seen it through a nationalist perspective. That's how we still see things in the news perspective, or more precisely, from a geographical perspective. You know, if you're a journalist in London, what's going on in Uzbekistan just doesn't seem to matter as much as it would, because we have to take a judgment call. We can't cover everything, and people in Britain don't care about what's going on in Uzbekistan all that much. So that's the prism to look at it through. And it's pretty blunt, but you have to make decisions about what you do. You can't cover everything, right? So how do you then cover something, and where do you put resources?
Shiv, stay with us. Tarek has called in from Milton Keynes. Good morning, Tarek.
Good morning, Nihal.
Are you satisfied by what Shiv Malik from The Guardian has said?
Absolutely not. No.
Why not?
The same day as Charlie Hebdo happened, abhorrent and everything as it was, the killings that happened in Nigeria, 2,000 men, women and children were murdered by terrorist organisation Boko Haram, was not reported.
But I guess, Tarek, just look at it from a news perspective, there were no Western journalists probably on the ground to see that happen. It was reported, and in fact, a lot of that was from satellite photographs. There was nobody on the ground to verify that was happening. Also, as well, of course, Charlie Hebdo was happening in a Western European capital. It could have happened here. It could have happened in Berlin. Therefore, it was much closer to home. So can you begin to understand why Charlie Hebdo was a bigger story for us here than Boko Haram, who had been killing people consistently for years now?
Yes, but I mean, the headline should have been that 2,000 people, their lives, from my point of view, mattered as much, if not more, because just sheer numbers.
But did they not matter? Do they not matter less to the news? Because of course, news has a finite space and it has to prioritise.
Maybe. The other thing also is the paedophiles that have been going on. They're always classed, as in like Rotherham and Rochdale and so on, they're always classified as Muslim paedophiles, Muslim terrorists, Muslim this, Muslim that. The whole spin... Is that true? I mean, well, you can ask Shiv Malik that. He works for The Guardian. Shiv, is that true?
Oh, look, I think there is a problem with how we categorise paedophiles in that sense. I think if they're Asian, they're called Asian paedophiles. If they're white, and we know there's plenty of white paedophiles in this country, they're not white anymore, they're just paedophiles. I think there is a problem with that. I think...
Would The Guardian be guilty of that?
No, we're not, actually. I don't think so. And the reason why it was pertinent that they were Asian actually came from a very complicated post-argument that the police didn't want to investigate, or social services didn't want to make the robust moves they did. This is as the argument goes, because they thought, well, they're Asian and we can't really police those communities. We shouldn't get involved. We're worried about racism. We're worried about being called racist, right? Which then makes it incredibly complicated. And that was the post-argument to that. But then we've seen, obviously, the police don't investigate things that have happened with plenty of white people working in concert with each other, right? So it's not even like it's Asian gangs, right? And Asians have a particular proclivity to form gangs when it comes to pedophilia. That's not true either. So we know. So I agree with there's a problem with that. Now, here's the other point about terrorism. Why it makes it is because look, we know there's groups of people, right, who act together and have been acting together to implement some kind of ideology, and give backing to these lone wolves, if you want, or even explicit support and guidance. So that's not the same, usually speaking, for racists in the US. They don't have massive, large organizations in the same way seeking to, for example, create a white racist state. Now, you could disagree with me and say, well, actually, Shiv, you're just blinded to the fact that, and here we go, here are the facts, etc., etc. But it's not certainly as explicit. We have ISIS in Syria saying, putting out videos, putting out propaganda saying, yes, these people in France doing what they did, they were brilliant, wonderful, we champion them, we want more people like that, right? I don't think we see the same thing with white racist organizations in the US. And if we did, I think the government would certainly crack down in the same way. Now, you might just say, well, Shiv, it's willfully missing the point here, but I think I hold to that.
All right, Tarek?
Absolutely missing the point. Absolutely missing the point. Blinded by, obviously, the job that he's doing. When you look at the facts are that anything negative, whether it is, like I said, paedophile, terrorist, or whatever, the very first thing it's labelled as is a Muslim.
But in the sense of terrorists, Tarek, the terrorists themselves are very keen to identify themselves as Muslims. Are you saying that the news should ignore the fact that a terrorist shouts Allahu Akbar?
The fact is that he is not a Muslim just because
Who are you to say? Who are you to say who's a Muslim or not?
No.
He thinks he's a Muslim, so who are you to say he's not one?
Okay. Right. The fact that he shouts Allahu Akbar in his own perverted mind, the way he's been radicalized or whatever, does not make him a Muslim. As far as us law-abiding Muslim citizens of the world will say that this person is not a Muslim. So the fact that he shouts Allahu Akbar doesn't mean...
But you can't ignore that, can you? As a news, you wouldn't be reporting the news and you would be accused of political correctness, gone crazy, if you decided to not say that it was Islamism. It was a radical form of Islam that pushed this person or guided this person into their actions. I mean, as a news organisation, Shiv Malik as a journalist would not be able to ignore that, would he?
But then again, the point is, if they were done, like you're saying, this chap here in the US, an atheist, it's not reported as an atheist. And then for him, and all atheists then have to turn around and feel obliged, like we Muslims have to sort of like say, oh, we have to be counted and say we're very sorry about what's happened. It's happened in France or wherever it's happened.
But Tarek,
but we have to be an apologist.
Shiv's already answered that point. But Shiv's already answered that point, hasn't he, by saying that as yet no one organisation of atheists, of militant anti-theists, has come out and said this gentleman who has been accused of this crime was one of us, or that we back what he's done. No one's come out and said that, whereas with Charlie Hebdo, people did come out and say that. ISIS did come out and say that.
One other point to add is that, look, we do know that he is an atheist because people have done the reporting on it, right?
Yes.
So that's not true. It has been reported. In fact, it continues to be. It's only happened 24 hours ago. So it continues to be reported. And no doubt things will build. But there also, it's hard because there isn't an established pattern around white racist killings in this particular instant. I mean, there is a generalized, there are incidents of white racist killings, but not in this sense, right? So it's hard to exactly who to go to, who's going to claim responsibility. Well, no one. Dawkins has come out and said it's got nothing to do with me, right? So it's insane to start to think to equivalize the two or make it seem like they are equivalent, because they're not.
Okay.
And how would you also then describe ISIS, right? There are thousands of people who run a patch of territory between Syria and Iraq.
The size of the UK, yes.
Huge, what are they doing it for? How would you describe them?
All right, Shiv, we'll run out of time, but Shiv, always good to speak to you. Shiv Malik there from The Guardian. Anil is in Pinner. A very good morning to you, Anil. I do apologise for having kept you on the line for so long, but hopefully you've had a chance now to hear all the different arguments that's gone on. What's your point, Anil? Oh, Anil's perhaps been waiting so long he's disappeared. Let's speak to Jay in London. Jay, good morning.
Good morning, Nihal.
Apologies again as well for keeping you waiting for so long, but you've now heard lots of different opinions. What do you think?
I completely disagree with the First Lady, Khalifa. First of all, she's saying Western media is biased, but what about the media in Pakistan? What about the media in Arab countries? Are they not biased? I personally think the Western media is the most fair media in the whole of the world, and then the most unbiased. And, to be honest, I expect, for the instance, the UK to report mostly on white issues, because this is a white country. So I don't actually expect them to start covering issues that are, Sikh issues or Muslim issues. I expect them to cover what is most important to the country that they are in, which is the UK, and the majority of people here are Christian people. So I completely respect the Western media.
All right, Jay, stay with us. Asif disagrees with you. Asif is in Newcastle. Good morning, Asif.
How you doing, Nihal? You all right?
I'm good, mate. Jay regards Western media as the most balanced in the world.
That's probably what RT think in Russia.
Yeah.
It's
Press TV in Iran, yes.
Yeah, Press TV in Iran. They all probably think that they're a fair representation of what goes on. But we're not in Russia and we're not in Iran. We're in the UK.
And do you think the Western media is biased against Muslims here in the UK?
Bias is quite... I don't think it's...
Do you think Muslim lives matter less? I mean, that's my top question.
Yeah, they do. They're not reported. It's like the emphasis. I mean... I can probably speak. Well, I'm not going to speak on behalf of all the Muslims that are in the world.
No, that would be difficult.
What I would say is, as soon as something happens on the news, we all sit there, as Muslims, and our first thought is with the families and stuff, and secondly, it's like a hope it's not Muslims, because we know if it is a Muslim, it'll be in the press, it'll be highlighted for weeks on weeks. And then as soon as these crimes happen, I mean, there's been crimes that have happened in the past where the blame has been put on Muslims to later be found out that they're not Muslims, and then we never hear about them ever again.
Well, originally when the Anders Breivik thing happened in Norway, there was speculation, is it a Muslim crime? Is it Islamic terrorism? And then, of course...
We were there thinking, is it a Muslim? And then it wasn't a Muslim. It was kind of... And then what we do is we focus on Islam, but we don't focus on other issues. Could this individual have mental issues? Did they need help? Was they spotted? And it's the focus and emphasis is put on the fact that they are Muslims, and that's where the problem arises from. And as soon as this thing's happened in the US, as soon as I saw it, I put it on Facebook and I said, let's see what the reaction in the media is going to be. And literally, there hasn't been a reaction in the media.
Sorry, could I just say something?
Go on, Jay.
I think, Muslims who are complaining that this doesn't come in the news. In the news, everything is mostly about Muslims, and we're actually already discussing a Muslim issue just right on this BBC Asian network. So there's no shortage of Muslim stories out there.
But this is the BBC Asian network, and of course we would discuss issues like this because we understand who our audience are, and we understand that our audience want to talk about these different issues. Go on, Asif.
And how, sorry, we live in a multicultural society. We don't live in a white country anymore. We live in a multicultural society. Britain isn't predominantly Christian. I mean, all of us are here.
It is predominantly Christian.
Well, sorry, it is. It is. Sorry, but it's we're all here. I mean, to go we have to expect to be treated like second-class citizens almost is not. That doesn't even cross my mind. I was born here. I'm a resident. My daughters are born here. like to be treated like, oh, you're not as important as us because we're the majority is just not right. Otherwise, like,
do you feel that's the case? I mean, that's a fascinating way of condensing the thought process into saying we just matter less. Do you feel that? Because of course you've got kids here, so do you feel that they're going to be brought up to believe that their lives are less important?
Now, when I grew up, right, my dad and all them, they used to go like, you know, save up for a rainy day because eventually they might kick us out, right? And we used to laugh and think, you know, that's never going to happen. I'm born here, like you know, I'm a Geordie, and then we sit there now, and honestly, like I worry for my kids, and I think like sometimes I feel as though there is an actual chance. We do feel like sometimes like second-class citizens.
That's fascinating. Save up because one day they might kick us out.
That's what they used to say. They used to go like, we need to invest back home and buy houses and stuff. And we've always just laughed it off and said like, it's never going to happen. But I mean, with the rise of the far right, and I mean, all this stuff fuels the far right.
All right, can you just wait there a minute, Asif, because I want to bring Anil in, who hopefully we've got on the line now. Anil, my apologies again for keeping you waiting for so long.
My apologies.
What would you like to say?
I would say that Britain is several cuts above America as far as reportage is concerned. America is always je suis America. We're exceptional, we're special, we have local agendas, our crime news is important, we celebrate ourselves. Muslims as a group, ever since 9/11, have been wearing a scarlet letter. That's a statement of fact. And however much Asif doesn't like it or resents it, that is the truth. Now, he either accepts it and recognizes the fact that he comes from a country which was basically a subject country. He has found a niche here, but he expects that niche to be comfortable and without rough edges. I'm sorry. It isn't on and is never going to be on. So America there's no word for impartial. They have bipartisan. You have Fox News as the leading news purveyor, for God's sake. Where can you go from there? So there's not much to be said for America. It basically covers stuff for local consumption, plays it to the gallery. Its politicians, its judges, its policemen are elected. And it is a little bit of Tammany Hall magnified. People don't recognize this, don't want to accept it. They are our cousins and they're a superior breed and all the rest of it. Fine. Go ahead. Think what you please. But their reportage is always slanted, always to the local thing. So I'm sorry, there it is. That's the way it is. They've never properly reported. They don't distinguish the Sikh from the Muslim.
Okay, Anil, thank you very much. Let's speak to Ali in Yorkshire. Ali, hello.
Hello.
How are you, my friend?
Well, Nihal, I'm fine, but, the subject, what you chose is very much lightning subject. And the people who were killed in America, these are 2 girls and 1 boy has been killed by next door neighbor. It hasn't been reported properly in the media in UK, and also has not been properly reported in America as well. If he's a Muslim, kill someone, name of the Muslim you can say, well, he's the Muslim and he's eradicated and this and that. If he kills 3 people, then all world, the news costers will be, every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, Muslim has been killed, 3 Jews or 3 English people or 3 American or 4 this and 4 that, you see. So actually this media is not working for the Muslim at all.
Okay,
they
Ali,
have their own agenda.
Right, Ali, thank you very much indeed for sharing that with us. What a very interesting first hour. Are Muslims treated differently? Do Muslim lives matter less when it comes to the reporting in the Western media? Rashida got in contact with us. After that, we'll speak to Fahad and Zahra. Rashida, good afternoon. Rashida, are you with us? No? Let's speak to Fahad then. Fahad, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you think that Muslim lives are worth less when it comes to the Western media's reporting?
Definitely. 110%. I am so, I was so angry yesterday at the way it was, how the media took, what steps it took to report the incident. and how, because as soon as I heard it, I went straight back home and I basically switched on my computer and I put CNN, Sky, BBC, all the main channels to see what they were doing, and none of them actually reported in a correct manner. All they did was have a bulletin at the bottom, and that was it. And I waited like half an hour to 45 minutes on each station on both screens to see what was happening, and no one actually reported in a proper professional manner. Now, like this,
the BBC did around lunchtime yesterday.
Okay, around lunchtime. But
remember as well, lunchtime is the morning in America. So,
Sure.
5 hours or so on the East Coast, more on the West Coast. So, in that respect, waiting until people get to work.
I waited till 7 o'clock after work, so I came back about 7
p.m.
So, 7 p.m. So if the media is always on the go, 24-hour news, and and news and information is traveling at quite fast speed that if they want to access it properly. So, like Piers Morgan said on his tweet, if it was the other way around, there'll be instant shock headlines everywhere, and that's how I felt yesterday. I was like, what's going on here? It was just like, I was just shocked. It was like, what more evidence do you need from the evidence from what happened yesterday? And also your guest speaker.
Well, you weren't sure, were you? You weren't sure it was a hate crime straight away. You assumed it was because, of course, you saw that the two young ladies involved wore hijabs.
Regardless of it being a hate crime or not, it's the fact that if it was the other way around, there would be instant headlines everywhere. Simple as the fact because of the word Muslim. That's a fact.
But what if what if the guy had screamed, "I am an anti-theist. My group, the Anti-Theists of America, are going to kill all religious people"? But he didn't say that. With Charlie Hebdo, they said Allahu Akbar. They said we're avenging the Prophet. Therefore, they made it very clear that these were political and religious statements that they were making.
They were clever in saying that. They weren't that clever. They got caught and got killed. But I mean, obviously they got caught. But in the sense of maximising the exposure by saying Allahu Akbar, people will freak out, saying, "Oh my God, you're saying Allahu Akbar is related to Islam." Fundamentalism, Islamism, radicalism. Allahu Akbar.
But it was all those things, wasn't it, Fahad?
Yes, it was. From their point of view, it was all those things. But like I said, if it was the other way around, if there was like I said, if this happened in like a Muslim had killed a couple of non-Muslims, then they would be all over the place. It would be everywhere. It's just like I was just really angry, and it's just like I had to calm myself down. And then just like, okay, fine, it's acceptable.
But are you comparing the two? I know. And, look, there are a lot of people out there who non-Muslims who would have a lot of sympathy with your argument that if it had been a Muslim, speculation or not, that had done it, that people would start to ask the questions immediately. And those questions were not asked immediately of the man who has been accused of murdering the 3 poor young Muslims in America. Yeah. But equally, you could argue from a news point of view, and you heard Shiv Malik, presumably from The Guardian, say this, was that there are different prisms that you look through. First of all, you look through it from a British perspective. Are there any British people involved? There weren't.
Yeah.
Secondly, it happened overnight. Third, so many people are shot and killed in America every day that it hardly makes the news anyway. The fact that 2 of them happen to be wearing hijabs, why would that make it any more serious?
Yeah, I agree to the argument, but the answer was partially answered by Charlie
Wolf,
Charlie Wolf from CNN, I think he was. Like he said, it was all about supply and demand. Now, there's supply for bad Muslim news. There is no, so there's a demand for bad Muslim news, but there isn't a demand for good Muslim news. So
but there's no demand for any good news, Fahad. When do you listen to the news and go, "Oh, that's a nice, heartwarming story"? How often do you do that?
Yeah.
Look, a cat got rescued from a tree. Isn't that lovely? Do you know what I mean? It's like, although saying that, when a group of Muslims with big beards went around tidying the snow from people's driveways, that made the news. I mean, I know about that because I saw it on the news.
But I didn't hear about it. There was I think about last year ago, there was an EDL group confronted some people in front of a mosque, and the mosque people brought them in and they had tea with them and they left peacefully. No one.
I remember that being reported.
No,
I remember that. Okay, it's not big news. It's not big news. But then, could you argue that is a big news story necessarily? Because I guess you can't think about it how we think about it. Because even the Asian network is a bubble to a certain extent.
Yeah.
What you've got to think about it is, what does Steve driving around the M25 in his white van? Does he care? A bunch of EDL got invited into a mosque and had some tea and coffee and cakes and went home. Does he care? Because so news is a business, right? It's about trying to find out what are the most interesting stories for your audience. So, for instance, there are big stories that we don't cover on the Asian network because they're not relatable to our audience, but they're big stories on mainstream news. Now, Ukraine, for instance, that's a massive story. The fact that Russia and Putin and the president of Ukraine are meeting up to discuss what's going on, the terrible things that are going on in Donetsk, where thousands of Ukrainians are dying, and yet we on the Asian network, we're not touching any of that. Now, if the Russians turn around or Ukrainians turn around and go, that Asian network, they don't value Ukrainian lives.
Yeah, I give the Asian network 10 out of 10. Well,
that's kind of our job. You don't need to boost us up for talking about things we should be talking about.
Because I've been listening to you for like a year now, and it's like you made me aware of so many issues, and I'd like to thank you for that. The other thing is, it's the steps. It's how they approach the situation. For example, like I said, if it was a non-Muslim, the approach would be totally different.
All right. Farhat, let me stop you there a second, because I enjoy reading your emails, because you send emails regularly, and I do really enjoy reading them. But stay with us, Farhat, because I want to bring Rashida in. Rashida, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, Nihal. How are you?
I'm very well. Do you agree with Farhat? Because Farhat said yesterday he got really angry and frustrated when he felt that the Western media were ignoring the deaths of these 3 young Muslims who, by all accounts, were fantastic individuals who were doing a lot of work in their communities. They were volunteering, charitable work, and he felt really angry and frustrated. Do you share those emotions?
I won't say I was very angry. I'd say I would be upset, just like when Charlie Hebdo and everything happened in the news. I was upset. I mean, when you hear tragic murders going on, I was upset. But then when you heard that he was a Muslim, it was like, oh my God, it actually is true. And whenever you watch things like this in the news, I always pray, okay, I hope things get better for them. And I'm like, please let it not be a Muslim. But then you hear next, okay, it's a Muslim. And what I did actually email in, and what my main point was, that they didn't cover this much in news. But you see, there's a lot of people that dislike Muslims or against Muslims, which is, if things like this are not covered in news, how do these people understand where we're coming from? They don't understand unless you switch channel to Al Jazeera or something like that, which they're not going to do. So, of course, things like that is kind of frustrating.
Do you feel, as a young British Muslim, that the media here in this country cares less about you than it does about other people?
To be honest, I do.
That's sad, isn't it, really? I mean, how old are you, Rashid, if you don't mind me asking? You don't tell me your exact age, but are you in your 20s? Are you in your teens?
25.
Okay, right, mid-20s. So you're young, right? So you're young, right? So in that respect, like, you're the future generations, like your kids, I don't know if you have kids, you might be too young to have kids, but, your kids will be 100% British, right? I mean...
Yeah.
And yet,
things like that, that's what I'm saying. When it comes to watching the news, there's certain news channels that are biased against this type of story. And I understand what you were saying, that obviously depends on your audience and things like that. But then I think there's got to be some sort of a balance. And that balance, there's no limit to it. No one's identified what the balance is, or, how to balance out a story. And that's the sad thing about it.
Rashida, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Zara Hussain got in contact with us. Zara, hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon. Zara, do you share Farhat's feeling of anger and frustration that Muslim lives don't matter?
To be honest, there's not much anger. There is frustration, but I'm not angry because it's the reality of Muslims and most other, other ethnic minorities in the UK and in the Western world. The problem is the fact that the media doesn't really care about, Muslims and ethnic minorities, purely because the media is, like you said earlier, the business. They sell the stories that the readers want to hear, and because we live in a white Western world, the stories about Muslims just don't matter.
But Zara, you know about the terrible things that ISIS have done to people because of the Western media. You don't, I take it, have Al Jazeera on all the time. You know about the terrible things that have happened in Darfur. You knew that 200 Nigerian schoolgirls were kidnapped by Boko Haram because of the Western media. So it's not as if the Western media doesn't care or only reports white people's stories or non-Muslim stories, does it? I mean, you do know about the world because of the BBC or Sky News or Channel 4 News, don't you?
But can you tell me which of those stories paint Muslims and, all the non-white people in a positive light? Which of those stories?
Well,
none of them.
But then tell me about how many news stories full stop. I mean, look at Ukraine, for instance. They're all white people. They're killing each other. There's no positive news stories coming out about Russia and about Ukraine that I've heard of.
But the difference is that if you look at the way Western society is created, or, how the hierarchy is, it will always be a white European, Anglo-American. They will always have, they will always be predominant in the news. They will always have more power. You've got history of the Cold War with the Russians.
Go to Pakistan or go to India and look at the media there and see how much they report about what's going on in the West. They don't. I mean, I've got the NDTV app on my phone. So I check that all the time. And yes, there are some headlines about what's going on, primarily something Obama's done or what's happening in the English Premier League. But apart from that, it's all domestic stories. It's all Indian stories. So you could argue, are they racist? Are they biased for doing that?
No. The difference is that, like you said earlier, I think it was a gentleman from The Guardian as well. I think his name was Shiv, when they said that stories, they have a geographical interest. So when you're looking at stories in the Middle East, in South, in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, those countries, they obviously put their own domestic issues at the forefront. Why does the Western media put the Ukraine issues at the forefront? Because their relations with Russia aren't the best. So obviously they had those power struggles with Russia, and you've got the history of the Cold War as well.
Good point.
So there's always the idea that the fact that the Russians are the distant, they're the communists, they're they're evil. In the same way now that Muslims, and centuries ago and for the hundreds and hundreds of years we've had this history of anti-Semitism. Now it's Muslims as well, as long as Jews. I'm not saying anti-Semitism is over, but now it's
quite the opposite.
Well.
It's on the rise.
Exactly.
And the proof seems to be that anti-Semitism, largely the rise of it, seems to be coming from attacks from Muslims.
I can't say. I don't know anything about that.
Well, it rose during the time of last year, and that was the information that I'd read, that it seemed to be the case that this was happening, and that the far right, the EDL and those kinds of people, no longer are leading anti-Semitism in this country. I mean, that's a massive shame. And it's quite interesting that you equate the two things, that Islamophobia and anti-Semitism is the same thing. It's hatred.
Same thing to me. They're creating a scapegoat. The fact is that for hundreds and hundreds of years, Jews have been considered, the worst of all creation, and it's disgusting. And now it's Muslims. Muslims are on, that hatred that people had for Jews, it's just been transferred over to Muslims because anti-Semitism isn't fashionable anymore, but it is fashionable to be Islamophobic. It is fashionable to hate Muslims.
It always really kind of depresses me, this, Zara, because, of course, it means that these are the kind of things that can radicalise young people, can't they, Zara?
Yeah,
because if you don't feel like you're part of this country, if you feel like this country doesn't care about you, then why will you care about it? And that's a real problem going forward. How do you think you can build that bridge again?
Well, I'm a teacher and I teach in a predominantly white school.
Right.
So with all my students, I always teach them to be a little bit more media savvy, to understand what is the media trying to say. I had, Do you
mind me asking, Zara, do you wear a hijab?
Yes, I do. I wear a abaya as well.
Right, okay, that's interesting. So that means straight away those kids know you're a Muslim?
Yes.
Right. Right, and that in itself is building a bridge, right? I mean, that's straight away, that's building a bridge. What do you think their impression of Muslims are, those kids?
Well, even though they can see that I maybe wear a hijab, for quite a lot of them, they don't really understand that I am a Muslim, which is really odd, and I have to repeatedly say, look, I'm a Muslim. So they will ask about questions when the Charlie Hebdo happened, when, ISIS are always in the news. When they hear about that, they always say, oh, those Muslims, and I have to say to them, look here, hang on a minute, I'm a Muslim, what are you trying to say? And then it takes them a few minutes to think about, to organise their thoughts. Because of the media, all they think about for Muslims is that Muslims are horrendous, horrible people, that Muslims are terrorists, that Muslims love violence. But then when I have to remind them, look, I'm a Muslim, do you think I believe that? Do you think that's my beliefs? Then they have to understand, okay, no, that's not right.
I mean, Sarah, stay with us. Rab's on the line as well, but I want to bring Fahad back in on this. Fahad, if there is this disconnect that is developing, whereby Muslims feel, and we can't speak for all Muslims, but both you and Zara have articulated this, that you're just not cared about, that you're not regarded as part of this society. How do we begin to rebuild these bridges? Because, for people of my age, my mates would say to me, I remember when I wasn't a Muslim. I mean, I was still a Muslim, but I was personally Muslim. No one defined me as that. I was just Jav, or I was just Yunus. No one thought about me, oh, that's Fahad. He's a Muslim, isn't he? They just go, oh, yeah, what's happening, Fahad? You good?
Yeah. I remember those days.
And that was it. Now, for anyone under the age of, basically anyone who was an adult pre-9/11, they'll remember that. But anyone now who's grown up post 9/11, they won't remember that time, will they?
No. I think it's more about mindset. My mindset now has changed a lot. My mindset is more about, yes, I'm a Muslim, I'm British, I accept where I am, I'm happy where I am. I respect the laws of the country, but also it's having a positive mindset, is making sure, okay, fine, this is the situation, but how do I overcome this situation? What do I need to do to stop this from happening, or stop someone asking me all these awkward questions? And, just try and build a positive framework in your mind to say, okay, fine, I know this is happening around me, this is what's happening to my community, what can I do to contribute to stop this happening? So that's how in the last couple of years, that's how I've changed now. So whenever people ask me questions, I sit down, I talk to them, I explain why is it happening, try to have a joke, try to have a laugh, try to break down barriers and make sure that, as a Muslim, I'm not dangerous. I'm not some alien from outer space trying to take over the UK and imply Sharia law throughout the whole land.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it's good. It's good to hear for her.
Yeah. So it's just stuff.
I'm sure you'll find some mullah who'll regard email as being un-Islamic. Okay.
I'm sure. There's always some. Just take it positive.
I've seen people discussing whether Candy Crush is un-Islamic before. It was haram before.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I did see that discussion once. I just thought, mate, some people really need to get out a bit more often. They really do.
Exactly, yeah. So I think it's just mindset, and it's just taking little steps.
Okay.
To overcome that situation. So that's how I've done it.
Yeah, and but Zara, the problem with that is, of course, is that as a Muslim, you might find yourself resenting the fact that you have to go around and keep explaining to people that you're not a nut job, when no one's asking every Catholic to go and explain that they're not a paedophile because of what Catholic priests have done.
I completely agree with that. It is frustrating, but that doesn't mean that we have to stop it. If people start asking me questions and all of a sudden I start saying, oh, that's all you think about Muslims, well then aren't I, pandering towards their views? Aren't I, proving what they're saying is right? So it is frustrating, and it is long, and it is monotonous and tedious, but you just have to keep doing it. I like what Fahad said earlier when he's saying that you just have to sit down with them, you have to break down barriers, and that's exactly it. I'm always smiling, so I look approachable, because in my hijab, in my abaya, I will look very scary, especially to some of the younger students. So I always make sure that I'm smiling, that I'm approachable. And yes, at the end of the day, my face does hurt when I come home. But you know, I have to make sure that people know that I'm approachable. That
But it is nice to walk around with a smile on your face. I mean, look, I don't have to do that, but it is nice to be friendly.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes, it is.
Why would you want to walk around scowling at people? I mean, I don't know why anyone would. Although saying that, to be fair, I've come across people that like doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, it makes for a better world if we're approachable. But I really get what you're saying. Both of you can stay up for a little bit. Let's bring Rab in on this conversation. Rab, good afternoon.
Hello there. Good afternoon, Nihal.
Now, you're, of course, putting forward the point that I'm not sure why everyone's so surprised. And I'm not sure anyone is surprised, actually, Rab. Are they?
Yeah, well, the people that have been ringing in kind of like trying to express their views as to they think it's wrong, what happened, and etc. I don't know why anybody's surprised, because there's so many things that are going on with the white non-Muslim community, which we don't get to hear about at all, about the amount of paedophiles and rapists and all sorts of people that are doing atrocities, and we don't get to hear about them.
I think we did hear a little bit about Jimmy Savile. I think we heard a lot about Catholic priests. I think we heard a lot about the inquiries into the establishment.
We get to hear the odd thing, and when somebody does commit anything, they're never labelled by their religion or by their colour. They're just labelled as a young man of this age from this area, and yet I'm getting, to be honest with you, sicker of this kind of way that we are completely, segregated, and we're labelled as by our faith or by our colour or by where we come from. The thing is, it's never, I don't know why, like I said, I don't know why even we're having this topic, because so many people get killed all around the world and we don't get to hear about it at all. And this is just a drop in the well. And I think they've done this on purpose, just to actually get people more, pumped up, so that you're going to get idiots who are going to jump on the bandwagon and become actually radical as a result of things like this. And that's what they want. What they want is that they're going to have a story like this, and then you're going to find some young Muslim who's actually just he's not actually into his faith at all, but he's just actually born into the faith, who doesn't know anything about the religion, who will then jump on the bandwagon, and he will become a suicide bomber, or he will become something that he shouldn't be doing, or should go to a place that he shouldn't be going. And that's what they want. They want to keep us in the media. The media is controlled by the Jews. I mean, we've said this many, many years ago. Some of the most powerful people in the world are Jews, and they will do anything to...
The richest people in the world, or amongst the richest people in the world, are Muslims.
Well,
look at Qatar. Qataris are the richest per capita people in the world.
You know about the ones who come out and say that, and I know that there's people that are, we don't even know their names, that are the most powerful people in the world. We don't even know their names. We've never even heard of them.
We've been told that they've been told that. I've been told by a number of people before that quite possibly some of the most richest people in the world are Nigerians.
Well,
but it's never declared. You can't really do it. So this idea that Jews secretly run the world.
Yeah, no, there isn't a secret about it. It's quite clearly what's going on.
I don't think any of my bosses are Jewish.
If that's not the case, Nihal, then why is it that whatever's been happening over in Palestine for years, where they've been killing innocent people, nobody does anything about it? Nobody even actually reports half of the stuff that's going on over there, because they want us. They only tell us what they want us to hear.
I don't think you can, Rab, with all due respect, I don't think you could argue that the Western media ignored what happened in Gaza.
Yeah, I can. I can argue it. I can argue it all day long, Nihal.
Well, do you know what? If you give me your email address, I can email you loads of links from last summer from the BBC. I can send you loads of news links from...
I can show you loads. I can send you loads of links as well of things...
What, you can send me loads of links ignoring the problems in Gaza, can you?
Yeah, no, I can send you lots of links of things that have been going on, which they haven't showed us.
Well,
there's loads of footage of actual, soldiers carrying out, going up to a woman, ripping her stomach open, pulling out an unborn baby child. Have you seen that on the news, Nihal?
What, you were saying an Israeli soldier did that, did you?
And I've seen it with my own eyes. Have you seen that? No, you haven't, and I don't expect you to see it, but what I'm saying is there's lots of things that go on around the world which we don't get to hear about, but the moment any Muslim even actually farts...
I've never seen or heard of any of that.
It's on the news that, he farted and it actually smelled like this, and he caused this nuclear explosion because he farted. To be honest with you, it's, you're doing your job the fact that you're on the radio and that you're, there to get people talking, which is, good of you, fair enough. But I'll be honest with you, none of whatever the media shows on the TV or on the radio, it's all.
I've seen plenty of pictures on BBC News of Palestinian children hurt really, really badly. I've seen plenty of pictures of that on BBC News.
Yes.
So what more do you want me to see?
Since what year now, Nihal?
Last year I saw it.
Exactly.
Last year I saw it. Well, mate, I've seen it every year.
Yeah, it's been going on for years.
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it every year. But these are political decisions that's made, aren't they?
You know the girl that was that I think she was I think an Arab girl or a Yemeni girl that was actually here to do she was here at the university, and she was actually stabbed up by two white guys or a white guy. It was in the news for about a day, I think. And then even afterwards...
But there was no proof, because there was no proof that was actually race... Wait a minute, there was no proof there was race-related, because there was a connection to another murder that had committed in exactly the same way. So that wasn't a race, that was another murder. And it was reported as such.
Lots of things, Nihal. And,
so none of your examples are actually...
a lot of people won't ring in and speak about it, Nihal, because the moment they ring in and speak about it, I get told all the time by friends and family that, why do you ring? You need to be careful, otherwise you're going to have MI5 knocking on the door. I said, they can come and knock on my door. I've got nothing to hide. I'm only speaking the truth. I'm not saying anything about... I'm not going to become radical. I'm not going to cause anybody harm. I'm against anybody committing harm to anybody. If one Muslim was to harm a non-Muslim person, I would kick his head in first. If it was a non-Muslim person who hurt a Muslim person, I would kick his head in. Even if there was to harm an atheist, I would kick the opposite person's head in. Why? Because wrong is wrong, no matter who it is. We're not here to defend Muslims. We're not here to defend non-Muslims. We're here to defend any humanity.
But Rab, the news reports on the Ebola virus, for instance. It reported on Darfur. It reports on what ISIS have been doing. It reports on the fact that part of the reason that ISIS was created was because Maliki in Iraq actually was biased against Sunnis, which helped create that. I mean, it's reported. The only reason I know all of this is because I've listened to Western media.
Nihal, you're in the media yourself.
Oh, yeah, but I'm watching the same news as you. Trust me, I don't get any... No, trust me, I don't. Yeah. I don't, actually.
Well, okay, maybe you go and look...
My head of news, Kevin Silverton, might do, but I certainly don't get exposed to any other secret stuff.
What I mean, not secret. What I mean is you being involved with media. It's like me now. I'm involved with my job, so anything actually related to my job, I will get to hear about first, because I'm involved with that side. But the thing is, Nihal, like I've said many times, I've defended you many times that you don't know about. I've had arguments with people, full-blown arguments, where people think that you're, think anti-Muslim or...
Don't worry, Rab, I get that a lot.
And I know, you've heard it yourself, people have told you that.
Yeah,
but I've
they're all
heard
idiots.
People telling me that why do you even ring the BBC Asian Network, because they're always talking about...
If I was anti-Muslim, I would be having this conversation in the first place.
We need to express to people that Muslim people are good people. There's nothing wrong with Muslims. Every type of faith people, there is always a bad apple. There'll always be bad apples.
Look at the Buddhists in Burma and Sri Lanka. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
It doesn't mean that they're all bad just because of a few handful of idiots.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Rab, what I want to know from you is the same thing I said to Zara and Fahad, is that how do we build bridges? Because my worry is, Rab, and this is a worry because, as I always say, and I don't wish to say this in a kind of glib way, but I have very, very close Muslim friends.
Yes.
And their kids are like my kids.
Yes.
And I worry for their kids. Because
I worry for all Muslim kids and non-Muslim
but we need to start building bridges. What we can't keep doing is talking about separation and talking about how much they and us. Because that language will only divide us more. And what was interesting was speaking to a teacher there who wears a hijab, who says how she conducts herself.
Do is what we need to carry on doing. which is talking about it like the way we're doing right now. Because at the end of the day, it's funny we're having this conversation. This morning I didn't ring in because I was actually at a car dealership and I was talking to the service manager there, and I wasn't able to get on the radio. And we were just having the same topic talk, right? And he was saying to me that he said that he was talking to some people that he knows in the pub the other day, and they were saying something about something they saw on TV about ISIS, and they were saying, oh, these bloody Muslims, they're at it, blah, blah, blah. And he defended Muslims, even though he's a non-Muslim, he's a white Englishman. He defended Muslims. He said, hang on a minute, I know this really, really nice chap by the name of Rab. He's one of our, he comes regularly into our dealership, and you've never met such a nice, blah, 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 blah. He was telling me himself. And then we got into a conversation over it, and I said to him, it'd be nice if people spoke the way I speak to you. And I said, I don't look at you as a white Englishman. I look at you as a human being. I look at you as a person. I said, why can't we be looked at in the same way?
Okay, well, look, I'm going to have to wrap up.
5 years of my life, I've lived in this country, and I've never, ever, ever had anybody call me a name, call me the P word, or, because of the way I look, or my family, my mum and dad. Never had a problem.
Rab, I'm going to have to stop you there, though, mate. Always good to speak to you. Always good to hear your voice and your opinions. Chris in Luton said, as a white British man, I found it disgusting that the Western media has seemingly not cared about Muslim deaths the same way they care about the deaths of white people. The sad truth is that the minority of those who classify themselves as extremist Muslims are fueling the rise of the far right in the UK, and I genuinely fear for my Muslim friends in the UK. Chris, thank you for that. Shazia on Facebook said, media bias. Had it been the other way round, the media would have no doubt been flashing breaking news. Harj on Facebook said, the pattern we are seeing in the media to tarnish Muslims is the same pattern the Indian government used against Sikhs before 84. Suhail said, 3 Muslims get shot dead by an atheist extremist / terrorist, and media had a silent approach. Disgusting media. Shuja said, had this man been of the Islamic faith and had murdered 3 Muslims over an alleged parking space, this would have been breaking news over most of the major networks. Samra said, Chapel Hill shooting is what happens when the United States allows movies such as American Sniper to be filmed. Pablo said, whether it was a hate crime or not, the fact is that 3 people lost their lives for something as small as parking, which is shocking. I find out about the story from Twitter, and when I looked on the BBC website, it was not on the homepage and took a while to actually find it. Lastly, Anil said, if Muslims feel that they are always discriminated against by the media and non-Muslims, then shouldn't they be asking themselves why this is so, instead of crime and Islamophobia, racism, misunderstanding and so on? Please ask your guests just how much coverage does world Muslim media give to treatment of non-Muslim minorities in the Middle East? Well, that's a very good point in itself. Right, let's move on. I want to talk about documentaries.